Travel, Roger and Sarah Bansemer visit the Bluegrass State. Join Sarah as she learns about the process of making stained glass at the studio of artist Marvin Jarbeau, while Roger sets up his easel to paint on a nearby farm.
Sarah and I have been so lucky to find so many beautiful places. And today we're in the rolling hills of Kentucky, not too far from Bowling Green. One reason we're here is to visit longtime friend Marvin Jarbeau. He and I went to art school together at the Ringling School of Art in Sarasota, Florida many years ago. And he has a stained glass studio just a couple hundred yards from here across the street. So today I'm using my French easel. I'm using acrylic paints. I'm going to paint this little barn behind us. I'm going to be painting on a masonite board primed in gesso. When I get all my materials together here, Sarah and Marvin are going to walk down the street and give you a tour of the stained glass studio.
We're in Strickler's stained glass studio here in Auburn, Kentucky, which is near Bowling Green, and this is Marvin Jarbeau. How do you produce a huge window? Do you make a pattern for it?
Well, the first thing that you do, of course, is you come up with a design, and then you make a cartoon from the design, which is a full-scale pattern, and I can show you one of those. Here we have a full-size pattern or cartoon. It just shows where the lead lines will go and where each piece of glass will fit. We cut from this cartoon, and then we actually build the panel on the same cartoon.
It looks like there are quite a few steps in assembling the glass. What procedure do you use?
Well, first of all, we lay out the pieces that have been cut, and we begin building in one corner, and we fit the piece of glass into strips of lead, and it's an H shape, so glass goes in either side. The lead is very flexible. The lead fits around each piece of glass. In order to hold the window together, we solder each joint.
Marvin, when I was in France a few months ago, I had the opportunity to visit some beautiful cathedrals, and I noticed that much of the stained glass there also incorporated some painting or hand lettering. How is that done?
Well, for hundreds of years, people have been painting on glass. Basically, you use what are called glass stainer's colors. They're various shades of brown and black and gray, and you paint to bring out the shadows of an image, also to draw the detail, the eyes, the hair, and so on. And so that's what we've done here.
How about an example of that? Can you show us a bit?
We can show you how this is done. First, I'm going to cut a piece of glass to the shape of the image that I'm painting. Okay, now we have the glass cut to the appropriate shape. And if I were going to start with the hair, make strokes. Want to go back in, I can pull away some of the paint that's gone on. Here we would do an eye. You can see how you can make a highlight in the eye. Eventually, after you have the whole piece painted, you take it to the kiln, fire it for its first firing, and then these things are permanent. The glass stainer's colors fuse to the glass, and you can scratch it and nothing will take it off. It's part of the glass as long as the glass lasts. To build up shadows on this face, I'm going to use my airbrush. I'm going to be using the same glass stainer's colors through the airbrush to build up some tone. So the next thing that I need to do is to just remove some of that glass stainer's colors that I've sprayed on there to shape details of the face, bring out the highlights. It's kind of tricky to try to imagine where the light is striking the face, where the highlights are. Sometimes it takes a few tries to be able to get the shape.
And does this only work on clear glass, or can you?
No, in fact, a lot of the things that we do are painted on the colored glass. If we're doing foliage, would be on green glass. We're doing a red robe. The shadows would be painted with black on red glass. And so you get the color from the glass itself, but you get the shadows from the glass stainer's colors. When this piece would be finished, we would take it to the kiln.
Well, here's the kiln room. What all happens in here?
Well, this is where each piece is fired. We place the pieces in the kiln, close the lid, and we fire anywhere from 1250 to 1350, fuses the glass stainer's colors to the glass.
Well, I think I have everything arranged now as I need it. I have my brushes and my paints. For paints today, I have titanium white, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow light, ultramarine blue, naphthol red. I have burnt umber, yellow ochre. Those are two earth colors. And I put some olive green out here. I've never used olive green before, but I saw it, I purchased it. I think I'll try it out today. For brushes, I have a small variety of brushes, more than I need, but I have some flats, a couple of pointed brushes, and a fan brush. I like this subject. There are many beautiful subjects right here. There's three great structures of barns. They all would make great paintings, but I've chose this for one reason, and that is I like the basic shapes of it. I don't have too much time here to do a painting either, so this is quite simple. But even though it's simple, it's very powerful and sort of truthful to me. There's some beautiful yellow flowers over to the right here. I want to be able to leave enough room to paint those too. These round bales of hay have been around quite a while, but there used to be the square bales. But now they make these huge round bales of hay. They can leave them outside much longer, and they don't deteriorate in the weather because the water just can't get through very many layers of that. So they stay fresh in the field much longer. They don't have to put those into barns like this. Actually, barns are becoming a thing of the past. Barns are not used too much anymore. That's one reason why I like to paint these. It's funny, I just don't know what my connection is to all of this. I'm just attracted to certain scenes, and I keep going back to them over and over. And farms and barns are one of those subjects that I just love. I didn't grow up on a farm. I don't have any real connection to them, but I do have a real feeling for the shapes and what they represent. Another thing I always bring with me, don't leave home without it, is a little sprayer, a little atomizer with some water in it. And it keeps my paints wet, keeps my board wet a little bit. I've got a couple of these, and sometimes they go bad. I'm going to put the sky in first. Ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt umber, just to make a gray color. It's quite a gray sky today. I'm laying this sky on pretty heavy, just so it covers Acrylics have a strange way of not covering very well the first time you put the paint on, unlike oil paints. So in order for this sky to be opaque enough where I don't have to go back over it a second time, I'm using this paint pretty thick. And I like to use thick paint, especially on light areas. Light has weight. So the dark areas I could have much thinner, sort of as a wash, but these light areas cannot be a wash. They have to be heavy. They have to be thick with paint in order for this to look convincing. I'm going to paint the side of this barn a little bit darker than it's going to end up, because I want to be able to place these boards over the top of it. If I have this darker, then those little dark areas between the boards will remain dark, and I can just put some lighter strokes over that to indicate the boards. Often my simpler subjects seem to be the most effective and the most powerful, at least in my own mind. That's why I like these simple shapes. These barns over here are just fabulous, and I would just love to sit here and paint them as well. But on a small painting like this, I often feel like I don't want to get too much in it and get too complex with it. If it's a small painting, I sort of want a small subject. Pick up a little bit of white here, yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt umber. I should have put out some burnt sienna, but I didn't. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of red, block in these big hay bales, maybe a little bit of Indian yellow. Look good in there. They're a little bit lighter on the side. Take a little bit of cadmium yellow light and block that in there. I'm not even going to clean my brush out. I'm just going to pick up some yellow here and some of this olive green that I just bought, putting in some of the foreground. This olive green is not going to work down here. I think it's too drab. Cadmium yellow, maybe some ultramarine blue will brighten this up. I'm going to put a little bit of burnt umber in it, though, to start off with. So I want to make this a little bit darker. I want to be able to put the lighter colors over these dark foreground grass colors. A little ultramarine blue, Indian yellow. Keep spraying that to keep it wet. And we'll put that tree line back there. I squint my eyes when I look at these subjects, and when I squint my eyes, it simplifies what I'm looking at. And when I squint my eyes here, the barn and those trees in the background are about the same value, meaning they're about the same lightness or darkness. They're about in that same range. So now when I squint my eyes and look at this, I can't really tell the difference between this grayish value and this greenish value. I think I should put this roof in now. One thing I like to do is get all my areas covered before I start putting in more detail in one area. And the reason is because one color affects another color so much that if I were to put in all the right colors, or what I think are the right colors here, then maybe when I put a color up here, it will change the way I think about the colors down here. This is all about relationship of colors. I'm going to be very tempted to put some bright highlights on that tin roof in a little while. The sun is coming around now. The haze is burning off a little bit, so by the time I finish here, this may change its character quite a bit. Pretty basic right now. We got big rectangle, a few circles, some real basic colors. But this is how I generally start a painting. And at this point, it never looks like much of a painting. But in order to get anywhere from this point, this is what I need to get down. These big basic shapes, the big colors and the big values. Now it gets a little more fun too, because after I get the big shapes down, I can start working on the details. Start to put the frosting on the cake. You have to have the right ingredients first before you start to decorate it. You have to have a good foundation. I don't know what kind of flowers they are back there, but I think they're just wild flowers of some sort. They're quite nice. I'm going to put a little sap green out on my palette. It's an awfully strong color, at least in this variety. Pretty green. It's very unnatural looking green. This is quite a nice bright green down here, so I'll take some of this sap green and mix it with a few other colors to dull it down a little bit. Yellow ochre should do it. And I'm just going to try and build this area of grass up. I can see right now this is too light. I'm going to have to mix up some ultramarine blue, maybe some of the olive green, and make this darker. So in a few minutes when this dries, I can put the lighter colors over it and give a better indication of these weeds and grass. As far as colors on the palette, if you've watched any of these shows before, you know that sometimes I just use 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue. And other times I put more colors out. There's no rules on this. I mean, all these colors are there for us to use and enjoy. And if I happen to like olive green today and want to use it, you know, I just use it and have fun with it. This is a good time to use maybe a fan brush or a beat up brush to put in this grass. I'm going to try it with a fan brush. It's a little intense there, so I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. Actually, I'm adding the white not to make this lighter so much as I am to cut down the intensity of the color. It's still a gray day, and I don't want these really pure bright colors down here. Maybe I'll add some towards the end as some highlights, but whenever I add white or black, it cuts the intensity of the color. Now, since I put those dark colors underneath, when I put the lighter colors on top, these little dark areas show through and leave me with some really nice texture down here. There's a little bit of a shadow coming off this shed. I'm going to get that in there because it makes the shed sit on the ground. It anchors it to the ground here. If I didn't have that shadow there, it would just look sort of pasted on. So everything has to tie together and everything has to relate to everything else. So putting this shadow down here, even though I don't see it as much as I'm putting it in, this will say this is part of this earth here, not floating off in some distant part of the painting. I need to do that to the big hay bales down here too. It's really hard to realize sometimes, but all these colors affect all the other colors so much. All this green grass down here is in many ways affecting the color of this wood. It's affecting the color of these hay bales. Everything's reflecting off each other. So this grass here, I'm going to see some of this green up here. Now I know it's there. I may not be able to see it with my eyes clearly, but I do know that this affects this and this affects this, and just vice versa. Everything affects each other. So painting always becomes more a problem of seeing than it does a problem of painting. If I could see it clearly, I could paint it clearly. But my problem always is being able to see things the way they are. And then interpretation comes into play there too. So I have two things to deal with. I have the problem of seeing things clearly and understanding how light works on these things. And the other problem is, how do I want to interpret it? How do I want to explain it? So often it's a battle for me to paint what I know is there and to paint what I think I see. So my interpretation of this is a little bit stronger than what I actually see. This is unusual how this roof goes, because this roof is crooked in more than one way. It bows up here and it bows down on the top. Burnt umber and ultramarine blue make a nice neutral gray. I've been using that since art school, I think. Just can't go wrong with it. Take a little naphthol red in here too. I'm mixing the color for some of the slats here on the side of the barn. Now I want to get this barn a little bit wet. Just spray it so these paints glide on a little bit easier. And I'll just vary my colors. I'll mix a little bit of some warm colors in here and some cool colors depending on which board I'm going to paint. I'm going to add some yellow ochre to this next board. Maybe a little more red to the next one. I'll just mix up a few colors here on my palette and I can jump between them. Now it becomes a little more clear as to maybe why I left this so dark to begin with, because I can paint these boards over this now, and some of these dark colors will come through. By spraying this with water, it allows this paint to slide over the existing paint there a little more easily. That's the only reason I'm spraying this. It's not so I can mix this color with the existing color, because this is already dry. Just helps the paint slide on it. Now these dark areas between the boards show up a little bit better. I think I'll want one or two of these boards quite a bit lighter, maybe wider too, just to get some variation in here. Now up here where this shadow is, I need to feather this wet paint into this dry paint so I don't have a hard edge there. I'm going to do the same thing on this roof here, put in some of these lighter colors. See some little hinges here on the very side, and I think, I'm not even sure whether there's a door in here or not. I don't think there is, but I may put one in there, at least put an indication maybe there's a door. So I'm just going to put these little indication of hinges right there, and then maybe put a couple more over here. I don't know if that'll work, but it's a pretty big area to have with nothing really going on in there. But I think I can remedy that too. I'm going to take a small brush now, a small pointed brush, and put a few little dark lines in here. Maybe put a couple extra lines in here. Another nice detail to this little shed here, and that's this little, it's called a stringer or something underneath here, holding up this roof. This is where you need a good brush with a good chisel edge to it. I can see this color right here is not quite right. I'm going to try and change that a little bit. It's just too gray. I knew these hay bales would be problematic. They look like they're simple to paint, and they are simple shapes, but to describe all that texture all that swirling texture that's going on there is a little difficult. I think I have the values pretty much where I want them right now. I think the colors are okay too. If the values are right and the colors are off a little bit, I can get away with that. If the colors are really good, but the values are off, in other words, if this was too light or too dark, then it just doesn't make a good painting. So values in many aspects are more important than the colors. Now, everything in the foreground is going to be a little more intense, a little bit brighter, and a little more contrast than things in the background. So that means down here with this grass, I can afford to have it a little more intense color-wise than I can in the background. Those flowers in the background, which I don't know their names, they're very nice. I do like those. I'm going to maybe put a few more of those here in the foreground. Well, I think I've brought this painting to a place where I can finish it quite easily in the studio. What I'll want to do is work on this area here. This is the center of interest, so I want to create a little more detail in these boards, because that's where my eye is probably going to focus the most. I'm going to put a few more highlights on this roof, work on some more details here with the hay bales, and work on this grass a little bit more. I put some flowers in it, maybe a few strokes of highlight across here, but I think I've finished all I can here out on location. It's been a lovely day. Everything's cooperated. The weather's been lovely. We've gotten a chance to visit Marvin Jarbo in his stained glass studio, and the people here on the farm have been kind enough to let us sit out here and do this painting. So before I leave, I'm going to take the digital camera, take some photographs of this shed, so I'll have some good reference material to work with. I'll take some details of the shed as well. We'll take it back to the studio, do those few corrections I mentioned. We'll varnish it, put a frame on it, and see what it looks like.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.